Okay, so here we are in case number 1 video workup. Okay, what we're going to demonstrate today is the two main ways, the two broad categories you can use Orchestrate to straighten the teeth. Okay, the first method is the point and peck method. The second method is the create ideal setup method. So with the point and peck method, the first thing you do is you click on add setup, and that's going to put us into setup number 1. And then you're going to choose your tooth movement velocity. Okay. For this example, we'll set this at 0.1. So that is for 0.1 millimeters in any of these linear directions. Okay. These 6 buttons control tooth movements in linear directions. These 6 buttons down here are for rotational directions, and I'm going to set this at 1 degree. So, and this is designed to be very simple and straightforward and easy. Okay. All you're going to do is click on gyro tool, click on the tooth that you'd like to move. That tooth is going to highlight red with the gyroscope, and then click on the desired direction. In this case, it's going to be facial. And each time I click on facial, the tooth is going to move forward exactly 0.1 millimeters. Okay, so now, in terms of the tooth movement velocity guidelines, this is what I recommend just sort of as a guideline. Okay, and this can be adjusted up or down based upon how the patient is progressing through treatment and other factors as well. But if you start here, it's a great point. It's a great place to start from, and I think that you will it will serve you well for the vast majority of your cases. Okay, so let's get back to that actual case. So what we've done is we moved this tooth now facially 0.3 millimeters. Okay. And we could probably move this lateral facially a little bit, as well as do some rotation, some clockwise rotation. So again, each time I click on these buttons, it's going to move the tooth exactly 1 degree for each time I click on the desired direction. Okay? Now, I'm going to go ahead and make another setup, which will then represent another 3D printed model. Okay? I'm going to click on Add Setup. Now I'm in setup number 2, and I'm going to go ahead and do some more clockwise rotation here, and maybe a little bit of facial torque here, and then we'd be done with this setup. Okay, and then now if we want to continue on, we just click on Add Setup again, and now we have setup number 3. And each setup will represent one 3D printed model. Okay, so hopefully that gives you an idea of how the point and peck method works. Okay, now let's go ahead and delete these setups and get back to 0, and then we'll show you how the create ideal process works. Okay, so now we click on create ideal setup, and then we're going to follow this tooth movement overview. Okay, basically we tackle the malocclusion in 3 steps. The first step is we work out rotations, facial lingual, mesial, and distal tooth movements. Okay, then we torque, we correct any needed torques in the teeth, and then we're going to do tipping, intrusion, and extrusion. Okay, so right now we're going to focus on number 1. So we're going to work on the rotations, and we start with the upper arch first. Okay, so we're going to work out the rotations here on that central. And what we do is we start with the upper right central, work our way distal, and then we're going to come up to the upper left central and work our way distal. Okay, so I just did some rotation here to the central. Now I'm doing some rotation to the lateral, and again, now we go all the way to ideal. We take this case to completion. And I'm going to move this lingual just a little bit. And as I look posteriorly, I think everything is okay. No corrections are needed. And to me it looks like this tooth could use some torque to even up those incisal edges. Now a little more rotation. And when I look at the left side going distal, I really don't see a whole lot of correction needed. So we have completed the first step here, and that is we've taken care of the rotations, facial lingual movements, mesial and distal movements, and now we've also completed the torquing. Now we're going to go to step number 3, and that is to work on the tipping, intrusion, and extrusion. So let's get back to our case here. What we do now is we're going to snap to the facial view, and I like to start on usually the left side and just rotate around looking at the teeth and finding any sort of tipping or extrusive movements that are needed or intrusive movements that are needed. So overall everything looks pretty good. So now I'm going to go ahead and go on to the lower arch. Okay. Now the first thing we do is when we look at the lower arch, we look at the midline to see if there needs to be any sort of midline correction, and the midline looks good. So we're going to go ahead and click off the upper, and now we're going to rotate around to the occlusal perspective, and then we're going to go back and we're going to repeat this same exact sequence. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to work on rotations, facial lingual and mesial distal corrections, and we start with the central incisor. And to me the central incisor looks like it's actually positioned fairly well. So now we're going to go straight to the lateral incisor, and the first thing I'm going to do is bring that tooth facially. Okay, now you can also use the gyroscope to move the tooth. Now if you grab one of these arrows, it's going to confine the tooth movement to that dimension. Okay, so it's going to confine the tooth to just facial and lingual movement. Okay, same thing here. If I grab this arrow here, it's going to be just mesial and distal tooth movement. Okay, so what we're going to do now is the first thing is some clockwise rotation. You can also grab the gyroscope here and do rotations this way. So if you have a tooth that needs a lot of movement, generally with the mouse I grab the gyroscope, move the tooth where I want it to go, and then fine tune it with these buttons over here. Okay, so hopefully that makes sense. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to correct the rotations, I'm going to correct the torque here, and then what I'm going to do is zoom in, and I'm going to move this to distal until it's just a tiny space there. Okay, a tiny space distal to the central incisor. All right. Then what we're going to do is now, again, we work sequentially distally. Okay. So next step now is you see we've got a little bit of overlap between the lateral and the cuspid. Okay. And now 90% of the time we correct it this way. This is a very simple, easy way to correct this. All we're going to do is we're going to click on the cuspid. Now I'm going to hold down the control key. I'm going to select this entire segment of teeth here. Now, each time I click on the distal, it's going to move this entire segment here distally. And you can see that each time I click on this, those teeth are moving distal, and they're moving en masse together. So I'm going to keep clicking until I get a small space between that canine and that lateral incisor. And then now I'm going to select this canine and do a little bit of rotation. I think it's going to look a little bit better with just a little bit of rotation there. Okay, and now we are going to move to the right side. I'm going to select the lower right central here. This tooth can obviously move facial, so move it facial until it is even with the lower left central. And then I'm also going to squeeze and push it distal just so there's a tiny, tiny space there. Okay, and now we're going to move on to the lateral incisor, and looks like this tooth could use a little bit of distal rotation, a little bit of clockwise rotation, and a little bit of distal movement, because what I want to do is create a very small space between all the teeth. And very small space. You can see what I've done here. These are very, very small spaces. All that's going to do is reduce the potential collisions between the teeth as they are aligning. Okay. And I'll get into IPR and those things on some of the future cases. But for now, we're just focusing on a very simple, easy case and sort of the fundamentals. Okay, and now you can see this canine here could definitely move facially as well as distally. And I'm going to add a little bit of torque to that cuspid. Maybe just a little bit. Okay, and then now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and move all these teeth here posteriorly because there's a little bit of overlap between this cuspid and that bicuspid. Okay. So again, I'm going to select that bicuspid, hold down the control key, select these 4 teeth together, and then we're going to move them distally until I just get a small space opening up there. You can see there's a small space between those teeth now. And then we're finished with the tooth movement from the occlusal perspective, okay? And let's refer back to our guide here. And so I sort of include the torque as I was working these out here. So now we're going to jump to the tip, intrusion, and extrusion. Let's get back to our case. And again, we snap up to the facial. I like to start on one side, rotate my way around, look for any sort of tipping movements that are necessary. Maybe a little bit of tip here. And we could definitely use some intrusion here. And we could definitely use some intrusion over here. Okay. And perhaps a little bit of uprighting, a little bit of distal tip. Okay, let's rotate around. Then what I like to do is I like to rotate back up to the occlusal, and because sometimes when you do a fair amount of tipping or intrusion extrusion, sometimes it will kind of throw things off up here a little bit, but this looks okay, all right? And so I would say that we are essentially finished with moving the teeth. Now we need to determine how many setups or how many 3D printed models we'd like to have printed now, okay? So again, let's refer back to our tooth movement velocity guidelines, okay? So here are the guidelines of how fast we want to move the teeth per setup, okay? Let's go back to our Orchestrate case here. And now we're going to look in our tooth movement table, and we're going to look for the largest tooth displacement. And from what I see here, it looks like the largest displacement is probably the 6.2 degrees of rotation, okay? Now, all we're going to do is we're going to click on Create Intervals, and let's just say we'd like to have this rotating movement done over, let's just say 4 printed models, okay? So now we're going to click on 4, click OK, and then what the software does is automatically calculate all of those tooth movements or all those setups, okay? Then we can go back and review this to make sure that everything is within physiologic parameters or within our velocity guidelines, okay? And so facial lingual, everything looks good here, nothing's above 0.3 millimeters. Mesial distal, everything looks good, nothing above 0.3 millimeters. Intrusion extrusion, everything is good, nothing's above 0.1 millimeters. Rotation, everything is good, below 2. Torquing, nothing is above 1 degree, and tipping, nothing is above 1 degree. Okay, so we're good. And this is where I would basically finish this case. Now, what I would do though is I would not have all 4 of these models printed at one time. Or actually, in an easy case like this, I probably would. However, I like to take my case to, you can see this is not perfect. It's close, but it's not perfect. What I like to do is have my patient wear these 4 appliances, have them come back, and then when the patient comes in, do a last little bit of tweaking based upon what I see clinically in the patient's mouth. If you do that, then you get very nice, perfect results every time. Okay? So hopefully that makes sense, and I look forward to seeing you in case workup number 2.